Have you ever noticed that the more authentic you become, the more uncomfortable others feel around you, that your ability to see through facades often leaves you standing alone? It's not that you're hostile, it's that you don't conform, and in a world addicted to social harmony and emotional convenience, non-conformity feels like rebellion. Your silence makes noise. Your questions disrupt comfort. Your refusal to fit into polite narratives feels like confrontation to those who never dare to think beyond what they're told. Søren Kierkegaard once warned that the crowd is untruth, but most would rather belong to the crowd than face the discomfort of truth. You don't unsettle people because you're forceful. You unsettle them because you are awake. In relationships, this makes you unpredictable, and where people crave control disguised as love. Unpredictability feels unsafe. You aren't willing to play roles for affection. You don't chase illusions for approval. You'd rather be alone in clarity than surrounded in performance. Modern love often rewards those who conform, not those who question. But you were never meant to play by rules written by fear. You were meant to walk alone, not as an outcast, but as someone who chose reality over ritual. The intelligent man is not dangerous until he refuses to play along. There's a cruel and inevitable law in this world. What you suppress will one day rule you, and nothing is suppressed more violently in modern society than depth, true emotional, intellectual, and spiritual depth, especially when it exists in a man. They won't say it out loud, but when you walk into a room, thinking instead of performing, observing instead of rushing to charm, their unease grows. Why? Because you've violated the unspoken contract. Be agreeable, predictable, pleasing. A man who refuses to play along, who will not flatter for attention, conform for acceptance, or shrink for approval is not merely misunderstood, he is feared. Carl Jung warned us long ago, whatever you repress does not disappear, it returns, disguised, in your behavior, in your relationships, in your suffering. Intelligent men, those who see through the masks and decline the charade, become scapegoats for a collective fear, the fear of truth, the fear of silence, the fear of unmasked reality. You see, when a man stops chasing validation, when he no longer begs to be chosen, he becomes dangerous, not because he wants to hurt anyone, but because he can no longer be manipulated. That terrifies those whose identity depends on being pursued, adored, or obeyed. And so the punishment begins not through open attack, but through subtle rejection, mislabeling, too cold, too intense, too much. But the truth is this, you're not too much, you're too real. When you don't perform, they call you arrogant. When you don't explain, they call you distant. When you walk away from drama, they say you don't care. But you know the truth. You've simply chosen not to be imprisoned by emotional chaos. You've walked out of the theater, and in doing so, you've broken the spell. This is not the path of comfort. It's the path of Kierkegaard's despair, the despair of knowing who you are in a world that begs you to forget. The cost, solitude, misunderstanding, but the reward is sacred. Your mind is your kingdom. Like Marcus Aurelius wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. When you realize that, your presence shifts. Your silence becomes heavier than noise. Your gaze cuts deeper than words. And those who haven't faced their own shadow will run from you not because you are dangerous, but because you remind them of the truth they are not yet ready to face. The intelligent man, therefore, is not hated for his intellect, but for what that intellect exposes. So the choice is before you. Assimilate or awaken, conform or confront, play a role, or become sovereign. Because here's the warning, the contract of performance is seductive. But every line you speak in the script of society costs you a piece of your soul. The moment you say yes to being liked over being real, you've already surrendered your crown. But if you refuse, if you remain true, you will be called names. Abandoned by many, but recognized by the few, and most importantly, you will finally recognize yourself. As Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You are not here to be a product of fate, you are here to become a force of truth. The intelligent man is not dangerous until he refuses to play along. The world does not break intelligent men with swords, it does it with silence. A silence that grows every time you bite your tongue to keep the peace. Every time you laugh at something that doesn't amuse you. Every time you tell yourself, maybe I'm just too sensitive, when you clearly see through the game. This is the invisible contract society offers you. If you suppress your truth, we'll let you belong. But what they don't tell you is that this contract has no expiration date, and it robs you in installments, not of your possessions, but of your presence. The man who avoids conflict at the cost of his integrity becomes the enemy of his own soul. Kierkegaard would call it despair not loud, theatrical suffering, but the quiet, corrosive kind, the kind that eats at your voice, your spirit, and eventually your identity. This is the man who one day looks in the mirror and sees only echoes of other people's expectations. Jung warned us of this too. The shadow you suppress will not disappear. It will show up in your relationships, in your reactions, and in your regrets. You may think you've outsmarted your darkness by being agreeable, but what you've done is invite it to run your life from behind the scenes. Because the truth is, every time you compromise your mind to fit in, you don't just bend, you vanish. You disappear behind a socially approved version of yourself. The entertainer, the romantic, the always available man. But underneath, there's a quiet rebellion forming, a part of you that remembers what it's like to speak without fear, to choose without apology, to live without performing. And when that part wakes up, it doesn't whisper, it roars. It asks questions like, why am I so tired around people? Why do I feel unseen, even when I'm loved? Why do I keep attracting the same patterns in relationships over and over again? The answer: because you've become fluent in the language of others while forgetting your own. This is the sickness of the intelligent man who plays small. He becomes deeply perceptive but emotionally dishonest, insightful but exhausted, noble but numb. And eventually, women begin to say, he used to be magnetic, now he just seems disconnected. They're not wrong. You are disconnected, not from them, but from yourself. And so the world punishes your awakening with loneliness. But loneliness is not your enemy, it is your compass. It tells you where you've betrayed your truth. And when you begin listening to it, not resenting it, you find the doorway back to your sovereignty. This is the beginning of rebellion. When you stop fearing the cost of being real more than the cost of being fake. From this point on, you will lose people. You will confuse women who expect a man to chase, flatter, and validate. You will be misunderstood, sometimes even hated. But that is the price of being unshakable. You were not born to be liked. You were born to become, and the man you are becoming cannot afford to live in fear of discomfort. So tear up the contract. Let the shadow speak. Let the truth hurt. Let the silence teach. Because the only thing more dangerous than being misunderstood is being understood for someone you're not. The intelligent man is not dangerous until he refuses to play along. You can delay your awakening, but you cannot delete it. The longer you suppress what you know, the louder it returns in your body, in your relationships, in your quiet moments when the crowd has gone and there's no one left to impress. The man who sees deeply but speaks gently out of fear is not humble, he's shackled. His silence isn't peace, it's pressure unexpressed. And eventually, pressure turns into pain. It manifests in restlessness that can't be solved with travel, in fatigue that sleep doesn't fix, in women who are beautiful but somehow feel hollow, in jobs that pay well but leave you empty. This is the cost of pretending you don't see what you do. Jung knew this intimately. He warned that what we push into the unconscious becomes fate. Until you make the unconscious conscious, he said, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That's not philosophy, it's a warning. Every time you let a lie slide to keep the peace, You teach your nervous system that truth is dangerous. Every time you let a woman seduce you into abandoning your boundaries, you train your spirit to accept emotional poverty. And each time you minimize your vision to keep someone comfortable, you dig your own grave spiritually, if not physically. Look around. How many men do you see performing, smiling without warmth, complying without conviction, speaking like they're walking on eggshells because truth has become socially expensive? This is not presence, it's a psychological disappearance. And women, ironically, stop feeling safe around these men. Why? Because there's no weight to them, no gravity, no root. But the man who reclaims his voice, he reclaims his gravity. And gravity changes orbits. He speaks less, but when he does, people listen. He's not chasing attention because he carries intention. He's not afraid to be alone. So his presence is not a currency, it's a gift. And in love, he's not here to impress, he's here to witness and be witnessed. Not as a role, but as a man with depth, direction, and dangerous stillness. Women who've never been around this kind of energy often misunderstand it. They call him cold, unavailable, or arrogant. But the truth is, he simply refuses to apologize for his clarity. And in a world addicted to ambiguity and emotional performance, clarity feels like confrontation. This man is not immune to pain. He bleeds. But he doesn't bleed for attention. He bleeds for meaning. And when he gives love, it is precise, not scattered, deep, not desperate, calm, not conditional. He no longer fears being left. He fears being lost in something untrue. And this scares people, because once a man becomes ungovernable by illusion, he becomes a mirror. And not everyone is ready to see themselves in that kind of light. That's why your transformation won't earn applause. It will be met with resistance, rejection, and loneliness. But that's how you know it's real, because truth costs you the world you once built on pretending. So what's the alternative? You can keep hiding, softening your edges until you're smooth enough to be tolerated and invisible enough to be left alone. Or you can sharpen them and let your clarity cut through the noise, because the world needs more men who aren't afraid of being misunderstood, more men who'd rather walk alone in truth than be surrounded by approval in lies, more men who show women not what masculinity should look like, but what it feels like when it stands still, unshaken. You are not here to be liked. You are here to awaken, and awakening is not a social performance, it's a personal revolution. The intelligent man is not dangerous until he refuses to play along. At some point, the intelligent man stops explaining. He no longer defends his stillness, his solitude, or the silence he keeps in crowded rooms. He no longer justifies why he won't chase, why he doesn't flatter, or why he refuses to soften truth for the sake of comfort. He simply walks away from the performance, and when he does, the entire stage collapses. This is the moment people feel his absence as gravity, not because he begged to be seen, but because he chose to be real. You see, most relationships today aren't built on connection. They're built on mutual delusion, on roles, reactions, and rehearsed emotion. The man plays the provider, the protector, the pleaser. The woman performs the muse, the mirror, the mystery. But beneath the costumes, both are terrified of not being enough, of being abandoned, of not being admired. But the intelligent man refuses this exchange. He does not show up to be praised or validated. He shows up to witness, to know, and to be known. If that is not available, he quietly exits. That's when he's called unavailable. No, he's just no longer available for games. He doesn't need chaos to feel passion. He doesn't need to be needed to feel powerful. He doesn't confuse unpredictability with love. He no longer plays the game because he sees it, and seeing the game makes you immune to its prizes. In a society that mistakes loudness for confidence and agreement for connection, a man who speaks with restraint and listens with full presence is unsettling. He's unpredictable not because he's unstable, but because he is governed from within. His yes means yes. His no is final. His boundaries are clear, and his silence isn't manipulation, it's mastery. When he walks away from a relationship, it's not because he's broken, It's because the mirror no longer reflects anything real. It's because staying would require him to shrink, to pretend, to contort his depth into something consumable. He doesn't do that anymore. And when he's gone, the room remembers. Because he didn't play for attention, he radiated from alignment. This man doesn't build attraction through seduction. He builds it through discernment, through presence that does not beg, through clarity that does not waver, through energy that says, "You don't have to like me. I'm already whole." And yes, this intimidates, especially those who've only known love through performance. But the intelligent man is not here to be feared. He is here to be felt by those brave enough to meet him without a mask. When he finally finds a woman who isn't disturbed by his depth, who doesn't flinch in silence, who speaks with the same precision and lives with the same presence, that is no longer a romance. It's a revolution. Because they don't love from performance, they love from power, from peace, from wholeness. So to the man reading this who has been called too intense, too quiet, too unavailable, perhaps you are simply too conscious to conform. Don't dim it, don't dilute it, and above all, don't apologize for it. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be respected by the right ones. The intelligent man isn't misunderstood. He's simply misaligned with a noisy world. He walks alone, not because he lacks connection, but because he refuses to betray himself, to belong. In a world that rewards performance over presence, the intelligent man retreats, not out of fear but out of clarity. The solitude that others dread, he embraces as a sacred proving ground. It is not isolation, it is alignment. Kierkegaard called it the leap of faith, the act of stepping away from the crowd, from the noise, from the easy applause, into a life governed by inner truth. For the intelligent man, this isn't an idea, it's a necessity. He would rather walk alone in truth than be surrounded in lies. This solitude becomes his mirror. Here, no one praises him for being agreeable. No one gives him credit for being charming. No one rewards his silence with validation. And that's the point. In solitude, he learns how to see himself without flattery, without distortion, without the masks others assign to him. And that is terrifying to those who've never done it. You see, the modern world tries to convince him to return, to soften his words, to explain his absence, to become palatable again. You'll be loved if you're less intense, they say. You'll be chosen if you play the game. But he has already tasted the freedom of self-respect. He knows that the price of admission to belong in a shallow world is the death of depth. So he stays out. He becomes unreadable to the crowd, but unforgettable to the few. The woman who is not afraid of his silence. She feels drawn to him not because he performs, but because he doesn't. He holds his gaze. He speaks with economy. His presence feels heavy, not because he demands, but because he doesn't chase. And in that stillness, she sees herself reflected, not entertained. This is not charisma, this is consciousness. And here's the paradox. The more aligned he becomes, the fewer people he can connect with, but the richer those connections are. He no longer entertains drama. He no longer negotiates with manipulation. He no longer lowers his standards to fit in. He doesn't want to be liked. He wants to be real. And so the solitude deepens, but so does the peace. Stoically, he now understands that his emotions are his to command, not his to perform. He channels Marcus Aurelius. You have power over your mind, not outside events. The world can misunderstand him, but it can't define him. Women can reject him, but they cannot unseat him. Relationships may end, but his self-respect remains untouched. This is not ego, this is sovereignty, Jung would say. He is integrating the shadow, not denying the parts of him that don't conform, but accepting them, honoring them, and building from them. The intelligent man is not running from anything. He's facing everything, inwardly, deliberately, silently. And that makes him dangerous, not because he harms, but because he cannot be controlled. His solitude isn't absence, it's armor. It's a space where he recalibrates, refines, and reconnects with what the world tried to erase in him: depth, discernment, direction. And when he returns, if he returns, he's no longer available for flattery, guilt, or chaos. He speaks when it matters. He walks away when it doesn't. He doesn't raise his voice, but he changes the energy in the room. That's power. So if you are that man sitting in the quiet, unsure if it's strength or loneliness, know this. Silence is the birthplace of strength. Stillness is where you stop being a reaction and become a revelation. They may not understand you, but you will never again misunderstand yourself. The intelligent man's silence is his most terrifying power. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't explain his absence. He doesn't chase, flatter, or apologize for his truth. And that is precisely what makes him a threat. In a world addicted to availability, stimulation, and noise, the intelligent man's silence becomes rebellion, while others overshare to be seen. He withholds to stay sovereign, while others perform to belong. He pauses to observe. His detachment isn't indifference, it's discernment. He doesn't chase approval because he's already claimed something far more powerful: self-respect. This isn't coldness, this is rootedness. He knows that most conversations are distractions. Most compliments are strategies. Most invitations are designed to extract energy, not to share truth. And so he doesn't participate in the theater. His quiet presence is not a lack of charisma, it's clarity. And this clarity does something unexpected. It adjusts people without raising his voice. He makes others speak softer without pointing out the lies. He makes people feel them. His gaze unsettles because it sees too much, and his silence irritates because it demands presence. Others feel it in their bones. He cannot be manipulated. That makes him dangerous. Society cannot market to him because he's not driven by fear or fantasy. Women cannot confuse him with emotional volatility because he's not seeking validation through romantic chaos. The crowd cannot own him because he is not for sale. He lives Kierkegaard's idea of the single individual, a man detached from the collective illusion, facing truth alone, not because he hates people, but because he won't abandon himself to be accepted. He knows the cost of false belonging is too high. It's the erosion of soul. So instead of performing, he rebels. He says less, but means more. He moves slowly, but with intention. His words carry weight because they're not currency, they're compass points. He does not shout to be heard. He simply embodies something few can name, but all can feel, and that unsettles people. Why? Because most people are terrified of their own silence. They fear the mirror he holds up. When he doesn't respond to manipulation, it reveals how others rely on it. When he doesn't chase after flattery, it exposes how fragile their confidence is. When he doesn't compete for attention, it forces people to sit with their emptiness. This man does not compete, he creates space. He doesn't speak to fill gaps. He speaks to cut through illusion. He doesn't touch to be liked. He touches when he feels presence. He doesn't say yes to be seen as nice. He says no to protect the sacred. Jung would say, he has integrated the shadow. He has befriended the parts of himself that society told him to bury: the intensity, the intuition, the refusal to settle. And now, he doesn't just have boundaries, he is a boundary. His silence isn't the absence of words, it's the presence of power. The Stoics called this inner citadel the unshakable fortress of the self. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the power to live true to yourself." And that's what this man does. He lives aligned with what is real, not what is rewarded. So when others try to provoke him, they fail. When others try to possess him, they lose. When others try to read him, they only read their own projection, because he cannot be decoded by people who've never decoded themselves. This is why he's misunderstood. Not because he's broken, but because he's complete in a world of half-formed selves. Not because he's too much, but because he's too real in a world that trades in illusion. And that's the revolution. He doesn't need attention. He doesn't need explanation. He doesn't need to be liked. He simply needs to remain aligned. And that alignment, that quiet rebellion, is what makes him unforgettable. The intelligent man's love isn't a game, it's a mirror. He doesn't love to control. He doesn't love to please. He doesn't love to win. He loves to see and be seen, and that terrifies those who only know how to perform. In a culture where romance has become a performance, where attraction is built on withholding, drama, and emotional volatility, the intelligent man is a disruption. He doesn't flirt with manipulation. He doesn't play hot and cold games. His love is like a mirror, clear, stable, and uncompromising. But most people aren't ready for that kind of reflection. He doesn't pursue for ego. He doesn't stay out of fear. He doesn't say "I love you" because he needs it said back. He says it when it's real and only when it's real. This kind of clarity doesn't feel romantic to those addicted to unpredictability. It feels unnerving. Why? Because he's not here to be consumed. He's here to connect. He sees through the performance. He watches how your energy shifts when you're not validated. He listens not just to your words, but to the emotional current beneath them. And when he senses deception, even if it's unconscious, he steps back not to punish you, but to protect the truth. His presence is precise. His silence is surgical. He doesn't over-explain his boundaries. He lives them. He doesn't beg to be chosen. He observes who sees him without distortion and who only loves what he reflects back to them. This is not cruelty. This is consciousness. He will walk away from a beautiful woman if she treats love like a game. He will end a relationship where he is expected to trade truth for peace. He will remain single for years if that means staying in integrity with himself. And that's the terrifying part, because most people are used to partners who fear being alone, who'll compromise, tolerate, perform just to stay. But not him. He chooses himself, even in love, especially in love. Kierkegaard described this dilemma with painful precision. He wrote about the leap of faith, how choosing real love requires vulnerability. But that leap must be made from a place of selfhood, not desperation. The intelligent man makes that leap, but only when the ground beneath him is truth. His love is not loud, but it is fierce, not possessive, but unwavering. He won't promise the world, but he will offer the one thing most never receive: presence without performance. That's why he's often labeled as cold, because in a world where affection is often offered as a bargaining chip, his calm and sovereignty feel distant. But it's not distance, it's depth. It's the depth of a man who's unlearning the need to be everything for everyone. A man who has learned to sit in silence, to grieve his own illusions, and to emerge with love that doesn't cling, it sees. His way of loving is rare. And like all rare things, it's both desired and rejected. Desired for its purity, rejected for its demands. Because to be loved by him, you must also be willing to see yourself, and that's not always beautiful. Jung would say he has integrated the anima, the feminine part of his psyche. He no longer seeks completion through a woman. He seeks reflection, reciprocity, a partner, not a project. In this, he's not looking to rescue or be rescued. He's not chasing a fantasy. He's ready for the real thing, and that's why so few qualify. So if he's in your life, understand this. His stillness is not withdrawal. His boundaries are not rejection. His detachment is not disinterest. It's all part of his deepest offering, truth without distortion. He loves like a monk who's seen the fire and returned unburned. Like a man who knows the cost of chasing illusions. He's not here to complete you. He's here to meet you. What the world desperately needs now are not louder men, but deeper ones. Men who carry their strength quietly, who love with open hearts but never at the cost of their integrity, who do not chase validation but stand calmly in their own worth. Men who disappear from the noise, not out of weakness but because their peace is too valuable to trade for attention. And if you are walking that path, if you are building yourself in the silence, in the shadows, brick by brick, know this: you won't be everyone's cup of tea, but to those few who truly see you, you'll be unforgettable. You won't be applauded by the crowd, but the few who've walked through their own fire will nod in quiet recognition. You won't always be understood, but in your own eyes, you'll never be a stranger. And that is power. That is freedom. If these words struck a chord, don't scroll away. Like this video to help it reach others who are lost in noise and hungry for truth. Share it with a brother who's still doubting his worth. Subscribe for more soul-deep reminders they'll never teach in textbooks. And if you want to support this message, if you believe the world needs stronger, wiser men, click the link below. Because in the end, your stillness is a revolution, and your truth, it's a light.